I call the meeting of the Tax Incentive and Abatement Study and Formulating Committee to order. I have given everyone a copy of all of the working documents that are online on the SharePoint. So I know we left off, everyone was doing their part of the larger draft document. I also included, the second page is the minutes from the last meeting on August the 9th to jog our memory as to where we left off. I am chairing today's meeting because we're in a little weird space with this being an election season and the runoff being on the 14th. However, with Councilmember Allen being here today, I'd like to start with her just to catch us up to where we are as of today. And I would assume that a large part of this meeting will be going through this draft, determining where we need to beef it up, and if there are any points that are listed in the draft that either need to be taken out or if we need to add to it, so that we can put together an actual final draft in the coming weeks. And so, Councilmember Allen.
Okay. You're supposed to call me Berkeley.
I'm gonna speak it into existence.
Do it. That'd be great. There we go. So, I mean, what we have then, starting on about the 5th page of what's been handed out, is kind of the working. We have sort of 3 working documents at this point. There's one that says Tax Abatement Study and Formulating Committee Report. That's it right there. That just has the beginning parts, and then Angel has thrown in some parts, and Fiona has thrown in some parts. And I don't know if that, your piece, when I was trying to open up Fiona's comments on the council website, it was doing funny things.
Okay.
So I don't know if y'all had an opportunity.
Was that
right there?
Is it, which page is that?
That is right before the conclusive data.
Excellent. Okay,
yeah.
so we've got that. Super.
So yeah, so this is.
So it's in it.
And really, it was just a cleaning up of the pilot and TIF portions.
Okay.
Definitely need the TIF portion edited
So it's
or
all
reviewed.
Okay, so.
But yeah, just trying to, because there were some sections that I think got moved around when they were combined. So just trying to clean it up.
Gotcha. So, executive summary obviously will sort of continue to evolve as we may discover that this is such a wonderfully concise report that we don't even need that. But so I don't know that we want to talk through that part yet until we're ready to the others. But then I would just move to the introduction, which was one of the ones that I think I composed, and so I would absolutely welcome input on what we've said there. Just trying to, again, give assuming, a new council member who just got elected is looking at this. So, I mean, I think that's kind of the target audience that we're thinking about. Who doesn't know TIF from LIHTC, from Pilot, and all those other acronyms that we've been talking about for forever. The one thing that I will say is where I say the study assessed, and then there are these bullet points, how tax incentives are awarded, that's a true statement. Whether alternative lawful applications exist for tax incentives. That language actually got picked up from the tax increment financing study as one of the things that we might do, but I'm not sure that, I mean, is that a true statement or not? We did sort of talk about some other things that aren't necessarily tax abatements, like some of the trustees' tools that just reduce how much taxes people pay, but they're not truly a tax abatement.
Which statement are we talking about? I'm sorry.
So again, on this first page, tax abatement and formulate under the introduction,
Okay.
where I say the study assessed 5 things, and the second one of those is whether alternative lawful applications exist for tax incentives. I think we can scratch that without losing any meaningful stuff. I would just throw that out for discussion real quick. Because I don't know that was a substantive part of our conversation of are there other ways we want to incentivize things that don't use these very specific tax abatement tools that all go back to state law.
I think we may have touched on it in beginning conversations, but we didn't really delve into that.
And do we wanna just maybe leave it potentially as a recommendation for future study? I mean,
Yeah.
that could be in the recommendation section that we just touched on it, and maybe that is for future study.
Okay,
Maybe,
I
we
don't know
would,
if we wanna leave it in.
perhaps we did look at this very briefly and the answer to the question is yes. That it's dot, dot, dot.
okay.
Very concise.
You're in Rex, okay, so to be expounded upon later. Okay, and then I think the other things are a good description of what we were gonna do, whether the methods should be expanded, and also, I'd say the methods and the criteria. And then whether there should be a cap and then possible methods for setting a cap if one is recommended. I mean, that was what drove us into this, and so I think that's important to state. So then the committee is made up of industry experts, which I think is a generous term, but we'll grow into it. So if you like the description of what you are and do, I just sort of was winging it on those, but if I didn't describe you right, let me know, or send me a note or whatever. And then, we may well have another meeting in September, so we can adjust that if we need to. And then I've just referred to who provided us input, so that's kind of how we got started piece of it. And then, on the overview of currently used economic incentives, I think that's, Fiona, where you have done a lot of improving.
Yeah,
of what we started with, so.
I mean, I just added the IDB section, would love input to see if that is, correct. Wanted to just keep it as simple as possible, because I think when I left here, I felt like I was overcomplicating this, and this wasn't the main part of this report. It's to give a brief summary, and then the meat was the recommendations, but still. So that's kind of how I proceeded. I know, Mick, you were also just trying to keep it simple, but again, somebody picking this up could briefly read kind of what the current pilot and TIF tax vehicles and how you
I think one big change, the last paragraph, the economic impact plan submitted to the mayor is actually submitted to the ECD director, which happens to be in the mayor's office.
Okay.
And then it
I might
gets
have found a
reviewed.
friend. I just this could definitely use some editing. But yeah, and I didn't know if that you had to approve it and then it goes to IDB, or if that was just the sequence of. That was a
So,
question I had too.
For the one that I worked on when I got here, and thanks to Josh for helping me navigate that. So it comes to the ECD director, and then it goes to Metro Finance and Metro Legal for review, before it goes to the IDB.
Okay, so
for
they,
consideration.
essentially you have to sign off and give input prior to it going. Okay, I can make those changes.
And this is the economic impact plan we're talking about, which is not something we do on a regular basis, right? I mean, this is a big deal for us to be actually doing that.
So are you saying it doesn't happen with MDHA too?
No, the economic impact plan, I mean, is that the market evaluation process that you're going through now, or do you do that on every
Oh,
single?
no, this is for every
single
single
one, okay.
applicant. Yep.
There's an economic impact plan, okay, gotcha. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so we should add the finance and legal folks in there.
I can do
Yep.
that.
Now, once council approves it, final signature will be with the mayor, at the end of the process, right? Am I correct, Josh?
Sorry, what do you mean?
If the TIF is approved by council,
The
doesn't the
resolution
mayor
passed,
have to sign that
Oh, yeah,
resolution?
he'll sign
Yeah.
the legislation that
Yep.
approves it, yes.
Because he signs all resolutions, okay.
Or she.
Or she.
Thank
Or
you.
she, thank you.
for that. I'm thinking of the one, I was
So sorry, the plan is approved by council. I just totally missed that. And then that's it. That was correct, or
Or-
is there?
Is the plan approved by council
I-
or is the TIF referred to as a plan, or is it referred to like the?
The IDB approves
Plan
it.
is referred to as TIF, is the TIF. So
Okay.
in the IDB world, it's an economic impact plan,
Okay.
and that's the
Okay.
TIF. That's what highlights or what describes the tax increment, where it's gonna go, where
Cool.
the kind of stuff is in the economic impact plan.
So
Okay,
maybe
so the
we should-
IDB approves it and then the council approves the TIF.
Correct, yeah, the
The
process
plan.
starts with the IDB approving the EIP, and then it goes to council for approval.
Okay.
So
And it's labeled,
maybe we should just capitalize those, yeah.
So, yeah, capitalize it to make it the,
It probably
okay.
says something like approval, resolution to approve the economic
Yeah,
impact plan
resolution.
adopted by the IDB,
okay,
or whatever the
Right.
project name is.
Yeah, I think I said the plan is approved by the council via resolution. I'll just capitalize the plan and maybe put in the economic
Yeah.
impact plan. Okay.
gotcha. And the, property tax revenue that is used for schools is not available for TIF financing. Is that, I mean, at this point now, we have set a percentage on, of the increment, we're only gonna use, let 75% be used for the loan and 25% still goes to the general fund.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing as saying historically the property tax revenue that is used for schools is not available for TIF financing? It's that same 25% or not? Or is there an additional part of it that's,
I know you.
So I'll actually need to check, I don't know if it's the school taxes, I know that the taxes reserved for paying debt has to be taken out of it. With respect to the 75%, I wanna say that's the residual that's left over after the debt taxes are taken out, or do you?
I think that there was just a policy put into place that only 75% would be utilized for TIF and 25% would not. But that is after the debt service would be taken out.
Taken out,
Off
yeah.
the top. Yeah.
Okay.
It's called any dedicated tax, which can be debt service or anything else that's dedicated for something. So even school debt service would be pulled off the top.
okay, it's pulled off the top.
And then whatever is left over, yeah, it would, 75% can be utilized for TIF, 25% would not. Conceptually, I think that's to save some of that money for schools.
I think it is.
So-
That was the public comment that led to it.
Yeah, so should that be revised? Cause I know, I mean, when I have done TIFs in other communities, usually schools are set aside, that funding directly, but in this case, we don't set it
I
aside
think
directly.
we double dip, it sounds like. Yes or no?
Well,
We only allow
schools' debt
75% to be
service.
used, and then we also,
So it's a cap of
Yeah,
75.
Say
I'm not sure how it's double dipping. but
okay,
I'm
maybe
not-
it's not.
So that needs to be taken out.
No, I think they're saying that's a true,
But I do think it's an overall,
so this is the
TIFs don't
question.
touch anything
Are you looking at it?
education, or that's the intent. So maybe I need to put that, and they lead into the TIF and not necessarily just the IDB TIF.
Okay.
I think perhaps just verifying what portion is for schools.
Yeah.
I think you buy yourself a lot of flexibility with that historically.
That's why I was like trying to be vague because this is above my pay grade. Like I'm have to, I'm like, I would.
But
maybe-
I'll let those two.
I was like, I.
Check on the
I
schools
think,
portion.
yeah.
Okay, I just thought, I thought that was the intent, or that's what I'd heard, and I will say the phone a friend that I use also.
Because there is
I
a
just feel like
portion
it's-
of property tax revenue that is reserved for schools. There is a certain percentage, I cannot recall what that percentage is.
Okay, so if do you wanna let me know, and then,
we'll
but
check
I
on
think
that
it, yeah, and whether or not it applies to all TIFs, I can move that to the front end instead of burying it down here.
Okay.
Yeah, cause that, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was thinking that 75% thing, that's something that came out of the MDHA TIF conversation from a few years ago, right? That's where that got implemented. And I guess your question, Fiona, is, was that implemented for all TIFs or just MDHA TIFs?
I think at this,
We'll look at that.
okay. And should we mention that specific 75% limit somewhere?
Yeah, and if it's
Yeah.
for, I can put that in the MDHA, but just, again, it was just kind of trying to speak in general about the process.
Yeah.
And maybe, but I think they're good points, but, so just let me know if I need to include something.
question, great. Okay, and then once we answer those questions, we're good with that one. And then we have the pilot low-income housing tax credit for low-income housing tax credit. Which, is that yours?
Yeah.
Is that yours? Yeah. So I guess one thing I want to say is, because part of what we're talking about is, do we want to set limits? And this one actually has a limit, but the IDB doesn't really have a limit, do they?
They-
Do we
they
want to
do.
mention, did we point out that difference?
They don't.
Thank you. Infinite power.
Well, I mean, they still have to come to the council for.
Council is infinite.
But they don't just hit an arbitrary number and have to stop like that does.
So going back, I'm sorry, going back to the school, what portion schools get, if you look at the tax levy ordinance, it breaks down what portion of, like, school fund is .986 per $100. Like, it breaks down what goes into which fund.
And is that an ongoing percentage year by year, or is that just what the finance director says? This year, this is what it's gonna break down to, because this is how our budget is.
That sounds like a finance director question. But it does break down, like, what goes into it.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, I think it changes because we have to maintain their level of funding from a prior year. So we have to make sure that we actually adjust that to ensure that they have the funding from prior year plus what they need or what's approved.
So the maintenance of effort is kind of what drives that.
That makes sense, yeah.
So I think that is a calculated number once we're done. Budget.
But I do think, and it would be interesting, in the IDB historically, because I think this was under IDB, was that portion, when they are doing the economic impact study, the portion that would go towards schools is not touched, which is, again, something typical I've seen in other implements. I mean, it's just a very hot topic that no one wants to touch, so that is usually set aside. So I don't know if that is for every economic plan, and maybe that kind of answers that question. Because this was about IDB, and I will say I found a friend that puts together those plans. Like, so that's why I didn't know if it was specific to that. Yeah. If that is the question, if IDB historically does stay away from them. And I don't know if MDHA is the same.
Maybe a Joe question. Who's the best person to clarify that?
I mean, I think between Margaret and I, we'll find it.
All right, you got it
And
on
I
your
just wanna
list.
make sure I'm clear on the question, sorry, cause I get confused. So the 75% cap is associated with MDHA, and I just need to know kind of what that language is. And then if that applies to IDB, was that the second part? And then historically, if MDHA, TIF stayed away from school funding, and then separately IDB.
Yeah, so if you look at the
Okay.
legislation associated with the redevelopment districts, it specifically talks about that, so that's,
So that
Under
is,
MDHA.
okay, so maybe it's just IDB clarifying, okay.
you know. All right, anything else on the TIF? Yay, Fiona, good job. All right, Nick, you're up.
I think we've seen most of this before. I don't know if it's the right level of detail. In terms of what we're looking for, but
And we spell out low-income housing tax credit, right?
Tried to-
Yes, it's
Yeah,
the-
oh, I thought you did. It might be in the overview, it's in the,
All right, we can check that.
yeah,
And
sorry.
when we get to the final version, we'll spell out all the words and the
Yes.
headings.
Okay, right.
I think
Yep,
this
sorry.
is great.
Okay, so then we describe that. Okay, and then I'm just backing up, because you talk about the annual budget there of the 2.5 million, which is, I think is a really important topic. Should we add, backing up to the two TIF versions, just annual budget varies at this point, just to
Yeah.
point out that?
Yeah, so so with my understanding of MDHA, right, they've got a total allotment to the redevelopment district, total TIF capacity, right? that's passed when they're created. And so it's more of not an annual budget like the pilots are, but it's a total authority towards TIF
Right, so
on the
it
MDHA side.
varies, but it's subject to the
And it gets sort of
each
used up.
development
across time.
district's max.
Yeah.
Right, so that's,
So is that gonna be included in this description?
so my suggestion is under the TIF MDHA, now that,
Yeah.
under administration agency, to add a little,
Yeah.
another bullet, this is annual budget varies subject to each development district maximum.
Yeah.
That makes sense, just,
Yep.
That's good.
but that's at least a statement that that's not unlimited.
Yeah.
Over the 30-year
And then-
period, whatever, it's just
And
like,
then the IDB will just be varied.
yeah, and it just varies, right? I mean,
Varies. Okay.
according to mood, right?
It's varied.
According to need.
According to each economic impact plan, right? I mean, okay.
And
It
the
just
welfare of
varies,
the
okay.
county.
Okay, that's great, all right, so now back to, anything else on the low-income housing tax credit pilot? Other than it's been wildly successful, do we say that?
Wildly successful.
Yeah.
I think that's the most successful one, right? Was that the one that produced the most housing?
I would assume so. I mean, we'll give, it's got a bit of a head start on the mixed income pilot, so it'd be, I think that's doing a lot of units in its first year, so, but,
So maybe we refer people to the appendix for just some numbers on how many there've been or something like
Mhm.
that.
yeah.
Okay.
Should we add a statement that says something about this has been an effective tool? See the
Yeah,
appendix?
sure, yeah, and I think, yeah,
Okay. Sounds good. See appendix for projects.
yeah, it was in here for it.
And that's where we get to put in Joe Kane's table. to
Yes,
show
yes,
those.
and yeah, I think, yeah,
But also, that will show sort of how that 2.5 million per year builds year after year after year,
Mhm.
which may make some people nervous, or it may go, that's a fantastic investment, we absolutely need to do it, but, I think that was part of our charge, is just to
yeah.
get all those numbers in context. Anything else on the LIHTC pilot? Okay, then on the mixed income pilot, so we should say this is newly implemented. That is
Yeah.
coming in.
And I think Angie provided us with some numbers early on, right, when they presented here. I think I have a copy of that, but, yeah, but nothing, have we signed, have they been
They're close on
official,
some of it.
official?
Haven't-
Okay. Legal docs or something? Okay.
Yeah, legal had to work out some starting kinks, but we can at least refer people back to, here's how many units are underway.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and I will happily work with Joe Kane and, Hannah for those two tables, cause I think those are helpful. And LaTanya, is there any way to quantify the IDB stuff, or is there a reason to?
It can be done, fishing
Okay.
through all the documents.
Would that be,
Is there a reason to?
that's the question.
Didn't we have a chart? I thought we saw that chart
We
that
have a chart
showed-
of all the economic incentives, which right now it includes
It includes
job
it all in.
grants and redevelopment districts. Well, I guess it's, tax incentives for the well, it's a mix.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I thought we did see a line item that had,
The incentive
Yeah.
review, in 2023, the revenue. I don't know if we can
Yeah.
simplify
Okay.
that.
yeah, but it's, I mean, both the housing focused ones are a little bit more straightforward, because it's a straight line between, capacity and units.
Right.
Whereas our economic development activities are a little bit less, their output variable is a little
Right.
less defined than a affordable housing unit
But then we can
RTOE.
refer people back to that other study
Yeah,
that was
exactly.
done, which is showing economic
Yes.
benefit, so. All right, let's
Yeah,
write-
and we
let's
could just
write
do
that.
like the economic multiplier or whatever the right terminology would be.
See appendix for Joe Kane table on the MDHA TIF. And then. In general, okay, we can add that. That sounds good. Okay, so I think in terms of talking about,
So I did, I looked at the long-term recommendations when I was working on my piece, and that's the last page.
okay,
And so in looking at, the redevelopment districts, reviewing equity of current redevelopment districts, are those funds better used in other parts of the county? Thinking about what additional incentives can be used to spur interest in the redevelopment district, cause I think about Bordeaux, there's $15 million in TIF financing available, and there's been no movement. And there's a great need for, redevelopment in that area, grocery stores, all those things that go along with that. And so how can, developers be incentivized to be interested in doing redevelopment in the area? What additional, because it's obviously not enough just to have the money available. There needs to be some additional work done to get folks interested in the area. And I know redevelopment in Bordeaux historically hasn't been really hyped by any administration. And so that's probably a piece there, having a administration that is actually interested, invested in redevelopment in Bordeaux and other areas as well, but Bordeaux is one of the most neglected areas of the city and has one of the richest histories of any area in the city. So thinking about what partnerships can the city forge in order to attract grocery stores, et cetera, to the area. I thought about the pilots that are available through IDB and MDHA, and there's a stigma attached with MDHA, which is a barrier to community support, particularly in historically African-American neighborhoods like Bordeaux. So I know I've done several projects, workforce housing, which is greatly developed, and have community meetings, everyone's on board, okay, we can support this, but then later on they've looked up, Parcel Viewer and see MDHA, and they're like, oh, this is a low-income project, and it's like, that's a whole tax, for tax purposes,
Yeah.
it's not an MDHA property, but there's that stigma.
you can tell them that MDHA built the convention center.
Yeah, there's just that, that stigma, that the fear of poverty being concentrated
Right.
in majority minority areas. I was thinking about what legal barriers exist to shifting more of the TIF administration to the IDB, and because of that stigma with MDHA, and I think based off what the mission is supposed to be of the IDB, having a larger role in redevelopment and in particular parts of the county. Maybe TIF funding for, I don't know if this is even possible, but TIF funding for Metro-owned real estate, not just land. We've bought several buildings trying to combat blight. And so Metro has purchased several buildings, but Metro is not a developer. And so perhaps incentivizing folks to help revitalize those buildings. And then looking at the caps for the pilots, how are those caps currently determined? And I guess we haven't exceeded the cap yet, because I was like, have developers been turned away because the cap was exceeded, but we
Right.
haven't
But we
reached
are,
that
we
point
are
yet.
close on the low-income housing tax credit.
And I think we may have maxed out the mixed income pilot the first
yeah,
first
you
time
filled up
around. So we did so far. Yeah, we've managed to not hit it on the low income
Okay.
housing, but I do think we're at it on
So
the.
did everyone who applied get it, or did some folks get turned turned down.
Yeah, I think that, yeah.
Some folks got turned down.
Yeah, and I think there's maybe a wisdom in that because it is a new program, and it's not quite as time tested. Those low-income housing tax
Right.
credit pilot's been around for a little bit longer, and we can
Right.
sort of see that. I'm torn about this in terms of like what should be the right approach. Should we just give it to everyone who needs it, or do we want to see some fleshed out a little bit further through the development process before evaluating whether it should be expanded? And the affordable housing advocacy side of me said like, no, let's go do it all and get as many units out there as possible.
we need
But
it to be
also,
successful.
but we also want it to be successful, and we don't want to. So I think there was some conversation about maybe the cap being bigger soon. But I think that would be, I think that's something, maybe a recommendation for council to continue to explore, right? Because this comes through the budget, right? The cap is,
Yes.
If you're gonna change the
Part of
cap
the,
for the.
It's legislative.
It's legislation.
okay, so it wouldn't be budget related,
Because-
it's just, it could be taken up at any time as
Right. It doesn't
okay.
actually show up in the budget.
okay, yeah,
Right.
okay.
Right.
So it doesn't need to, okay.
Right, it's just, it's but for.
So I think a recommendation I would think would be worth considering is one where council continues to evaluate whether we should expand the mixed income pilot given its level of interest and hopefully effectiveness.
Who awards these mixed income ballots?
My understanding goes through, it's an application to the Health and Ed Board is the sort of administrating structure, but the housing division within the planning department is sort of the administrator, sort of the paperwork processor kind of evaluator of it all.
And that's because careful reading of state statute pretty much drives it to that particular organization for multifamily housing.
Yeah, you looked into this a
I
lot.
did, looked
You
into it.
as someone.
And tried to change state legislation so that MDHA could do it because they know the most about it, but.
But do we keep, and here I am, with this diversity, are the same individuals getting the projects and the dollars to build the projects?
Again, that one,
What you talk about.
only has one, it's only got one go-round, so we don't have enough of a track record to establish a pattern yet.
Okay.
There's nothing written into it, similar to what's in the Barnes Fund, to set aside something for capacity building for smaller ones, and that might be something to look at. That might be something to recommend.
Yeah.
But I think we could look at who received the grants for the mixed income pilot and see if it is the same players who get Barnes funding. who
It's
get-
not, because this
it's
is
different people.
a for-profit
Okay,
tool,
so it's
so
completely
it's
different
not,
people. Okay,
it's not the same, not-for-profits that are doing stuff.
okay,
But the question is, next year, will it be the same for-profit builders,
Yeah.
at the
Gotcha,
expense of
yeah.
others? So I think that's a really valid question. So I think it's worth,
Which is a good segue into my database, because I think if we have that database, then that information will be available for everyone to see. Transparency, transparency, transparency.
And, sorry, I just wanna loop back, cause I get confused easily. So are we recommending, I know in the last meeting, we talked about recommending an increased cap on the LIHTC, and we all agreed that seemed to be a tool that's really working, and that is a straightforward one. So are we also recommending a study to recommend, sorry, that's a lot of recommend, a study to increase the mixed income pilot as well? Or are you, it sounds like we're not there yet, maybe,
I think that's what we're saying, is that we've now got a
to look at it.
5 or 6 year track record on the low-income housing tax credit, and we've seen the results and also the demand. And we have come close to bumping up against the cap, so that, housing could be built if the cap were higher.
Okay.
We're at that point on that one. We are not at that point on the mixed income. We recommend letting it get to that point and then evaluating. And, and we may just say, similar to what happens on the redevelopment districts, there's an evaluation period at least every 7 years, or as needed, more frequently.
So maybe, are we gonna write that into the recommendation, that those mixed incomes just continue, that program continues, and is evaluated for future growth? Okay.
And I think that means, Quanta, you'll flesh this into sentences, is that right?
yep.
And then Angel, you got your, this is kind of process stuff on the whole transparency and the TITD, just to throw in new acronyms for us. Where do you see this section fit? I mean, I think this should be in front of the recommendations. What do you think?
I think you're right, because I think the data is so important, so, yeah.
So we'll put this in as a section before the kind of conclusions and recommendations, as part of it. Walk us through it.
Oh, we're prepared to walk us through it. Well, my recommendations, really is about creating transparency, where diversity and inclusion will exist. And I think that's through the database. Then we'll be able to see how first, a good explanation of what these tools are, so that individuals who are, organizations who are interested in providing affordable housing or economic development or whatever our city needs will know these are the tools that exist. This is how they've been used in the past, so they can go and look and say, okay, I can do this, because they have a measure to do it by. And then you'll have the information and the history. And you can do good projectiles when you have history. And I just think that's so important, but we don't have that. It's like in all these different places. Bring it all together so you can go right there and see it. And our little Nashville.gov hub has lots of information, so.
Finding it is the challenge.
Yes, it is. It is difficult to find. So that's, the TITD, so. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, is this something, I mean, all of these are associated with parcels. Could it be a layer on parcel viewer? On the, the planning department's parcel viewer?
Oh, I like parts of it.
Everybody loves parcel viewer. But I was just thinking like, one thing is, can this information that's sort of described here be integrated into something that people are already commonly using, like a natural plug into that? Maybe parcel viewers, I think we've got a few different mapping pages that the city maintains. That's the one I go to.
That's what
So would all the TIFs, you mean the TIF information be in parcel view?
Yeah, so you've got, you'll be like, here is a TIF allocation for the Bellevue Mall. And you go, you could turn on show TIF economic impact plan projects. And you turn that layer on, and then you'll see the map of Davidson County, and there'll be this purple highlight over here, and a purple highlight over here, and a purple highlight over here, and then you could click, and that's, I'm just trying to think, there's something nice about integrating with already maintained databases, and it has a common element in that it's real estate. It's got a physical location, so we have mapping software. What that doesn't easily do is say, look at performance metrics and sort of pull that out easily. It would require, so that's the downside of that. So I don't know what.
But again, I mean, I think the goal is to have a central spot where everything is explained, but then, we've heard from Margaret, IT, doesn't like creating things in multiple places, but if we ask them nicely, they are willing to point to things from as many different places as is logical, eventually. And so to me, if on Parcel Viewer you can pull up all the TIFs and all the palettes and all the whatevers, and then
the data be there when you, from parcel view.
and then when you go to it, it would then redirect you to the database that has the information or something like that.
And maybe there's a drop-down menu like zoning history, permit history, economic incentive, and the breakdown of that right there is part of, it wouldn't be that complicated from a data structuring perspective,
Possibly.
I don't think.
Yeah.
But it would just be, I don't know, the GIS and dealing with all that stuff.
I think we ought to talk to IT about that.
Good idea.
And I guess what we're doing at this point is making that recommendation.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I think if you talk about it here and then it ends up in the long-term recommendations.
But I think that, just what you were saying, not that if I got this wrong, you let me know, but the transparency, it's a hurdle for people who aren't doing this all the time, and so it's a select few, we all talked about that spin, so I think it kind of dovetails into some of the other areas where people may be developing in that don't even know it's there, or different, so I mean, I
Yeah.
think it could touch on that in the executive summary too,
Yeah.
of how transparency
Yeah. That's
can
good.
provide more, a greater group
Right.
of people information.
Is there almost a responsibility of metro government to make this information really, like in terms of not even just like, but facilitate the use of these programs that, that sort of, almost like a consultant in the planning department or somewhere who says, okay, this is you want to do this is how you go, or like this is, I don't know. I think people call the housing division and ask them questions, so they are facilitating
Right.
that role and the use of it. So maybe it's happening
Right.
already, but.
But,
do people call you about the IDB and then?
People call me and
yeah.
I have no place to direct them on the website to get information.
Okay.
So they're gonna ask their questions to the
Yes,
best of my
there we go,
ability.
yeah.
And what I can't answer, I call Josh and go,
Yeah.
am I missing this?
Yeah.
I mean, and
No, it's not
ultimately,
there.
I don't know if it's us to I mean, I do feel like it's up to us to at least recommend, this should ultimately live on ECD and have pointers from planning and MDHA, or it should live under finance and have pointers from all those
Yeah.
others. I mean, I'm not sure where it
Yeah.
should live, but, ultimately, somebody will have to own it and build it, and then everybody else should be able to point to it from as many different places.
But I like the Parcelville, because actually
think
when
that's
you
a great
pull it up, and in Parcelville, you click on that parcel number, and then it takes you to all the information anyway on the side. So why not have that legend built out where the other information populates? And then if you wanna do history of, then you click and it sends you to the other database.
We just need it as a search tool though, because if not, you would need to know where you're looking for. You know what I mean? Like you'd have to go to that specific
You'd have to know
parcel
the
and it would
parcel,
be,
right.
it would
The
show
parcel
What
up.
I'm
With the
thinking is
address
like,
in.
there's like, you can
The legend.
turn on different layers.
Yeah.
So you can turn on like
That layer.
historic
Yep.
or flood zone or something else, like all these
Yeah,
different
change-
layers,
yeah.
and you could do a layer
it'll show up
that
with
is
red.
Yeah,
Yeah.
put it out, yeah.
incentive.
Yeah.
Then you just have to zoom in the right amount to actually be able to see. I think that's also helpful though, because I think so many people think again, for affordable housing, they think they're all concentrated
Yep.
in southeast Nashville.
That's right.
And actually, once you look at the MDHA stuff,
It's all
that's
over.
all downtown,
Yeah.
and the Barnes Fund is now getting splattered everywhere, so, I think also being able to
See that.
see those geographically
I think so.
is a good indicator that it is more widespread than people think, and that it's really obvious where the total blanks are,
Right.
which is also relevant information.
Right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to name that, I think.
But to touch on your point of spurring development too in areas, I mean,
Right.
it's tough because retailers, we were doing TIF deals, looking at grocers, and even with free land, we weren't getting it to work with TIF, and financially, and so I think it may take something out above and beyond that, because remember, TIF is for horizontal, it's not even for vertical, so you're only offsetting a portion of your costs. Granted, there's a lot of infrastructure upgrades that are needed typically in the city, but since we didn't touch on any other in great depth, maybe that is the recommendation, to focus certain areas where the MDHA funds were not used and figure out, recommend further study of what can be done in those areas in addition to TIF, because I don't know if that's gonna be enough, candidly.
This reminds me of, going back to the early point you brought up, what alternative lawful applications exist for tax incentive? The transit-oriented development TIF allows for affordable housing, at least for the vertical construction to be included in the calculation. That's so that we know that there's already one state-enabled tool that we have not yet successfully implemented in our city. So I do think that's an important recommendation. I think we're very focused on transit. We're very focused on housing. We have a tool that the state has given us that we haven't yet implemented, and I think that should be a recommendation. I would suggest that we should make that recommendation
There's a
in our.
committee now working on getting it implemented. So.
Yeah.
So specifically targeting TOD in the,
So you can have, so that's what,
using that, okay.
Councilmember Syracuse talked about their
Right.
attempt at doing it in Donaldson. So maybe there's lots of lessons that can be learned so we can have a more successful outcome next time, but.
And so potentially even looking at doing those TODs in areas where MDHA had TIF to allow for vertical
Yeah, I
construction to
think,
be included, because that would be helpful.
I don't know how the transit-oriented redevelopment districts and redevelopment districts, if they are, you can put them on top of each other, or they automatically trigger the, like if it'd be, whether, I don't know the technicalities of how those two things. Margaret, do you have anything?
So Quante, it almost seems like you've kind of got two things. One is sort of the questions, what can we do to make other things happen? And then kind of ultimately for the things that we know are already there, we need to do this, and here are the things we need to continue to explore.
Right.
And I wonder if you elaborate on those in a section before the conclusion, and then in the conclusion, circle back around to them and recap the things that need to be explored. Is that?
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe I make it more complicated.
I mean, the TOD, I missed that meeting, so I'm not completely versed in it, but would it be helpful to include that as one of the background? I just don't, it's not been implemented.
I think maybe that goes, I'm giving you more homework. I think when Councilmember Toombs talks about, other things that we don't have a track record on,
Okay.
or that maybe we don't know if they exist yet. I think
Right.
TOD is one of those, as well as your sort of what can we do to make these things happen in Bordeaux.
But there is an outline of what how the process for the TOD, or is it not?
Sort of. I mean, it
Is it not
sounds. I mean, what? So we had Diana Alarcon here
Yeah.
talking about what she's looking at doing, but I think at that point, because she came in after Jeff Syracuse's thing had come up, I mean, I think he had sort of come at it from a somewhat different angle. And that information is important to what she's doing. So I don't know that we've gotten
Defined
far enough
process.
along to say we've gotten it figured out yet.
Okay.
But we did get far enough along in that process that there was a vote on council for
In the Donaldson
it, and on the Donaldson one, like we did, that was figured out to the point of it could have happened.
Almost happened.
It almost, there was like one vote, or I don't remember the exact number, but yeah, it was, so it was something that MDHA spent a lot of time on and council spent time on.
Right.
And that didn't happen, so they did get the point of figuring out what it would look like.
And I just feel like those MDHA people need to get together with the NDOT people. Because it sounded like they hadn't yet.
It did sound like they hadn't yet in our, so
I
maybe,
think there's someone from MDHA on that committee,
Good.
I'm almost sure.
Okay, good. Is that something, do you also sit on that? I mean, can you?
Yeah,
Right. Okay, good. So you can be our connection on that one.
for the next 3 weeks.
3 weeks? I hadn't heard that officially, and I was just gonna decide it wasn't true, so. All right,
Usually it ain't.
Okay.
So,
so, well, I feel like we're blazing forward. What's the strategy to get this over the finish line, Ben? Can we, once again, there's a document on the council resource page, which I finally found today all by my big girl self, but it was not easy. Should we continue to send, edits to Danielle?
Yeah.
And is there a way for Danielle to then begin to put those in a single document, do you think, or what's the best way to do that?
We can work on that.
Okay.
I'll inquire.
Okay. I mean, I would say let's,
Need to edit too.
yeah, let's look at the pieces that we're editing and then make it clear to Danielle where they're coming from and to, and then we'll discuss the best way to sort of incorporate.
I'm not sure if we got all the way in to the end of your recommendations, did we? Because I don't think we talked about the pilot.
The last one?
Yeah, I think we,
And that was just, going further along with the low-income stigma with, the current income limits that we use for the pilots, and possibility of having a pilot that addresses at 80 to 120% of AMI.
I think, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. If they would not call it low income, because actually 80% of AMI to 100% is not really low income.
Right.
It's depending on which scale you're looking at. Because some of the low income is $98,000. That's really not low income.
You often look at the regional numbers versus Davidson
Right.
County too.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe we should say mixed income when we're introducing the idea. So that.
Because I think, like, with the MDHA pilot, like, it started as a low-income tax pilot, and then they started doing the income averaging.
Yes.
That allowed them to get higher percentages.
Yes.
Of AMI, but it's still considered a low-income tax credit.
You should probably say lower. But yeah.
Well, and when, in one of the iterations of the mixed income pilot, it went all the way up to 120. But Angie was concerned that the biggest gap is in the deeply affordable stuff, and so she
Yeah.
reconfigured that to ensure that it did that. But I don't know that there's anything that prevents us from, once we learn more about, the way it's set up, the deeper the affordability, the better your abatement is. But if it just takes a little bit of an abatement on 120% AMI, then and maybe we set it up as a two-tiered thing with two different caps, because I think we don't want to
Sounds good.
make nothing happen in
Yeah.
the very low income. But if we could also make something happen in the workforce, that's another
Yeah.
less
It's,
stigmatized.
it's difficult finding housing, and when you work 2 jobs and you make
It's like you're over
$53,400, you're $300 over the
Yeah.
52,000,
Right.
Yep.
Exactly.
and you don't make enough money to go to the next tier or to afford anything else. It's like, are you for real? And they're working 2 jobs, so we gotta find a happy medium, and maybe the 2 tiers would be. That's a good suggestion.
I mean, I think it's also helpful, obviously, we all agree the more housing in the market, the more rents are compressing, but, I mean, there are infrastructure challenges, so to be able to offset those with this, make more sites available for
Yeah.
redevelopment as well, if they can have help.
Yeah. Infrastructure is huge.
Right, which is back to the using TIFs to spur.
Yeah.
So I think everybody knows what section they should be working on and what the suggestions are that have been made. And do we want to set a deadline for, trying to have those, y'all are going to try to help us answer a couple of the very technical questions that we came up
Yes.
with. So maybe, do we want to go a whole month? Do we want to go 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
Not this is relevant for any particular reason, but sometime after 14th, does your status change at all in terms
It
of?
does, but we
Does
don't
it
know
change
how.
immediately? Does it change immediately, or is
Yeah.
there?
I think so.
Is it?
What do you know?
Yeah, I mean,
You didn't have
for
to
the
be sworn
purposes of
in.
this, of committee, I mean, if we know that you've been elected, then
Okay.
I think it's fine, but.
Yeah.
Technically,
Because there is like, let's not schedule it for a time where if there's.
Don't schedule it for the 14th, I'll say that. You're busy that day. Just a little bit. And you can't leave until you give us all your thoughts, so.
Yes,
Okay.
so, I mean, my date is almost the 14th too.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know what's gonna
All right.
happen to me come the end of the month.
That's right, okay. All right, well, let's, okay. So given that, I can't get to my calendar. Well, that's just a week from now, so we're after that date regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Wednesday seems to be a good day.
20th.
Works. Okay, let's do that, okay. So we're looking at 2 weeks from now. Wednesday the 20th.
Okay. I'll be out of town, but I will have my draft done and turned in.
Okay,
When do we expect that to be our last meeting or not our last meeting? I think we have a different approach based on the answer to that question, right? I guess there's no reason for us, not to drag things on, but there's no reason, there's nothing, when does council go back? Not until.
So technically, the way the ordinance was written, for the resolution, I can't remember, we said that we would have this done essentially in August, unless extended by the council. So it probably would be great, I mean, if the council, once they meet in October, can officially extend it for another month or two or whatever is needed, if it seems like that would get a better product, you know, or allow us to get our language better.
Wait a minute. I'm an appointee to the committee, regardless of my position. Just remembered, right?
You are the mayor's appointee.
So I'm an
But you
appointee
also-
to the committee regardless of my actual job, right?
I think that's,
I don't know the answer to that question because I don't have the legislation in my.
Okay.
so the mayor just had to appoint someone,
Yeah,
And
and they
this is
just
the name
happen
of the
to have chosen
right?
the economic development director,
Right.
but if I'm not, I can still be on the committee.
And,
so.
and I don't want
Okay.
to speak this into
I just
existence,
realized
because
that.
I
Okay, cool.
believe you will be here, but on the 20th, say, the universe flips upside down, or something. So that means you would be on vacation, you could
And I
be
have
here,
a,
and you wouldn't be,
I'll
it
be
would
at-
just be, I'm just,
I can't
just
remember.
clarifying
Should
that. I
we
mean,
do, should we do the
No, but
27th
we
then?
need our fearless leaders.
Should we do that, would that work for you?
We need to reschedule.
I know there's
Probably
gonna
a
be like a
connection.
formal swearing in that week, right? That last week in September.
Okay.
There is, I think it's gonna be, I mean, I would think that it's gonna be later in the week. The
Okay.
25th is the date that the election commission is getting together again to certify the results from the 14th.
Okay.
Um, you know, nobody's won yet, so there isn't a specific date for an inauguration and swearing in, but I think it's gonna be later. I would assume that it's later that week.
Potentially on the Wednesday.
I would
That's the
think
27th.
Okay. Good.
So
Yeah.
we might wanna go later.
Thursday or Friday, the 22nd.
No, the 28th
8th or 29th.
Okay.
Oh, so maybe we should.
Councilmember 2, would the, teams, would that work? The 27th work for you, or does that not work as well for people? Because it sounded like,
I'll be in
my
town
Wednesdays,
on
my Wednesdays are crazy.
Okay.
I have a church
I
board
think a
meeting
week
on
later,
the
on the
27th.
7th
I'm gone. I'm gone then.
of,
What'd you say?
I said I'm gone then.
You're gone? Okay.
Yeah, I was so focused
So
on
why
the
are we not
Does it
doing
have
it
to
on
be
the
a
20th?
Wednesday?
Because I think we're,
yeah, we'll have,
Connection.
I mean, either way,
On the 20th.
Councilmember 2.
you're not gonna be on the 20th.
On the
either.
20th, I'll be doing a presentation at Connection America, so 4:00 till 6:30.
I mean, we could do
Different day.
Wednesday, October 4th. I mean, that's, council will be back in session then. We could do, how does that work as far as legislation on that first meeting, council meeting?
The filing date's the 22nd, so if we need to file legislation to extend the work of the committee, we can do that on the
Okay.
22nd.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's just do that. Okay, so October 4th.
October 4th?
Might as well.
Already on my calendar.
It's already on my calendar.
Committee.
You did like set up to never end. It is not gonna never end, I promise that. We were close. We were close. Okay, great, let's put it on there. That's perfect. But that doesn't mean wait until then.
Right.
I think while it's fresh on our brain, let's try to
Right.
fill these things in. That'll be perfect.
Okay.
Good.
And just FYI, the IDB is currently, they have an ad hoc committee that's trying to figure out what their role is going to be in the city, how they're gonna move forward, what they'd like to really get into. So the next meeting is the 13th,
Uh-huh.
as well as next week,
September.
as well as their full board meeting is also on the 13th. And Angie's coming on the 13th to talk to them about some housing stuff, because they keep saying they wanna do housing, but not sure what that means.
Uh-huh.
So Angie's gonna give them some ideas and suggestions on how
Great.
they could help.
What time
And
is that meeting?
I would love input.
What time is that meeting?
Full board meeting is at 10 o'clock, Wednesday, September 13th, in this room. In the morning. And I gotta get the notice done tonight. So next week. Their ad hoc committee is at 9 o'clock, same room, next Wednesday.
Okay. All right, so are we clear on our marching orders?
Yes.
We are. I think we're doing good work. All right.
So what's our deadline? Give us a deadline.
I think, I would like to, I would
Anything
like to
yet.
see, revisions made in the next 2 weeks. And then we'll meet to discuss it in another lifetime. October 4th. Okay, so that one is.
So are we gonna bring anybody in from IT to hear our ideas?
I think we definitely need to, our job is somewhat high level, and this would ultimately happen, but I think it's absolutely worth a reality check with
Yeah.
IT and the mapping folks to say, it's
Yeah.
just crazy.
Yeah.
I think we should articulate the goal in the report and let the professionals and technical experts implement towards that goal.
Right.
Would be my sense of it. There could be a lot of different ways to solve and achieve these standing
Right.
goals. So I think we just need to make sure that we're clear in the types of things that we're looking for. And
Right.
hopefully they'll be able to implement them. Because I think my gut feeling would be there would be probably half a dozen different technical experts who have expertise in one little piece of this, and we couldn't get them all in the room at one time and figure stuff out. We
Right.
just, my impression of
Yeah.
we should just articulate what we're wanting and ask.
Right. But maybe somebody check with Keith to see if we're totally out in the field or
Okay.
possible. All right, Madam Chair.
All right, if there are no other items or concerns, meeting is adjourned.
Great.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.